Imagine waking up to discover that half your neighbors have died overnight, that there are no more coffins in the city, that the smell of death fills the streets. This isn't a horror movie. This really happened just 100 years ago. Her flu killed more people than the entire First World War. Ghost towns, orphaned children wandering alone, doctors fleeing hospitals. And worst of all, you would never survive it. In the next few minutes, I'll show you what it was really like to live through the deadliest year in modern history. Brace yourself, because what you're about to see will shock you. Are you still wondering if survival was really that impossible? Then let me tell you a story that will chill your blood. It was March 1918. The world had already been bleeding for 4 years because of the First World War. Millions of soldiers were dying in the trenches of Europe. But on a remote military base in Kansas, an ordinary soldier named Albert Gitchell woke up with a fever, a headache, and a cough that ripped through his chest. The doctors thought, just another flu. What a fatal mistake. Because that simple man, whom no one remembers today, was about to unleash something far worse than all the bombs and machine guns of war. In just 4 months, the virus growing inside him would travel the entire world. 1/3 of the world's population would be infected, and between 50 and 100 million people would simply disappear from the face of the earth. To give you an idea of the horror, World War I killed 15 million people in 4 years. This flu killed at least 50 million in just 2 years. It was as if 3 world wars were happening simultaneously, only the enemy was invisible. It was in the air you breathed and spared no one, not even you. But how exactly did this virus become a mass killer? The answer lies in 3 deadly waves that swept the planet like tsunamis of death. The first wave began at that base in Kansas and spread through the spring of 1918. You know what's most frightening? It was relatively mild. Only 75,000 Americans died between April and June. By the standards of the time, it seemed like a common flu, but a little stronger. People thought, phew, it's over. How naive, because while everyone relaxed, the virus was mutating, traveling in trains packed with soldiers, warships, military convoys, silently arriving in Europe, Asia, Africa, spreading like an invisible ghost, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then came September 1918. The second wave exploded like a biological nuclear bomb. The virus had mutated into something monstrous, something doctors had never seen before. Do you know who died the most? It wasn't babies or the elderly, as expected. It was healthy young people between 20 and 40 years old, the strongest, those who had everything to live for. Why? Because their immune systems were so strong that they attacked the virus with such violence that they literally drowned their lungs in liquid. They died of their own strength. In Philadelphia, 200,000 people gathered in a patriotic parade on September 28th. Days later, the city looked like a war zone. Thousands dead, hospitals collapsed, corpses in the streets. And just when everyone thought the worst was over, among February and June of 1919, saw the third wave, less intense than the second, but still deadly. Hundreds of thousands continued to die. All in all, 3 waves, 2 years, at least 50 million dead. And you still think you could survive? But numbers are just numbers. What will truly chill you is discovering what it was like to try to live in the midst of this chaos. Because when 50 million people die in 2 years, society doesn't just suffer, it simply collapses. Imagine arriving at the hospital with your feverish child in your arms and finding bodies piled in the hallways. There were no beds, no medicine, no hope. Doctors reused surgical instruments without sterilizing them because there wasn't time. Nurses worked 20 hours straight until they collapsed from exhaustion. Many health professionals simply fled, abandoned everything, and ran for their lives. Schools became makeshift hospitals. Gymnasiums became morgues, and when the morgues filled up, the bodies were left to rot on the sidewalks until someone could take them away. Have you ever imagined living in a time when there weren't enough coffins to bury the dead? Entire families fought over wood to make homemade coffins. The most common noise in the cities was the sound of hammers hitting wood, building coffins day and night. Many bodies were stacked in ordinary wooden boxes as merchandise. Others were thrown into unmarked mass graves. Thousands of families never knew where their loved ones were buried. Global life expectancy plummeted by more than 10 years. In the United States alone, it fell 12 years in just 1918. Imagine suddenly losing more than a decade of your life. The global economy collapsed. Global GDP fell between 6% and 8%. the equivalent of a Great Depression. Factories closed, farms were abandoned, entire towns became ghost towns. And worst of all, orphaned children wandered the streets alone. Some villages in Alaska lost 78 of their 80 inhabitants in just 12 days. Entire families were exterminated in a matter of hours. Schools closed, theaters empty, churches abandoned, markets deserted. Life as we know it simply stopped. Streets that once teemed with life became open-air cemeteries. It was as if the whole world had become a zombie apocalypse movie. Only the monster was invisible. It was in the air and there was no safe place to hide. So as people tried to protect themselves in this hell, the answer will show you how far humanity is capable of going when desperate. When there were no medicines, when there were no vaccines, when there weren't enough doctors, there was only one thing left: covering your face. Red Cross volunteers spent entire nights sewing gauze masks, ordinary hand-sewn gauze that barely protected against the virus. But you know what's most impressive? People wore these masks as if they were sacred armor. It was literally the only line between life and death. Imagine going out on the street, knowing that the air you breathe can kill you and all you have is a piece of fabric, sewn by a volunteer. Entire cities banned gatherings, weddings, funerals, masses, and everything. Shops, restaurants, schools, and theaters closed. Something we've experienced recently, but which in 1918 was absolutely revolutionary. Some cities, like Boston and San Francisco, implemented these measures quickly and managed to control the second wave. Others, like Philadelphia, reopened too early and paid the price with thousands of lives. But here comes the most surreal part. Even in the midst of the apocalypse, there was resistance. In San Francisco, an anti-mask league was formed, people protesting mandatory mask wearing, claiming that masks were useless and violated individual freedom. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Even with bodies piling up in the streets, some people preferred to risk death rather than give up their convictions. When medicine failed, people turned to anything that could give them hope. Seances proliferated. Entire families tried to speak to their dead. Prayers, promises, rituals, anything went in an attempt to escape. Of the invisible virus, healers sold miracle potions. Charlatans profited from the misfortune of others. And desperate people bought anything that promised salvation. But not all was horror. Amidst the chaos, the best of humanity also emerged. Neighbors cared for neighbors. Strangers shared food. Volunteers risked their lives to help in hospitals. Nurses worked themselves to the brink of exhaustion. Doctors who could have fled remained at their posts. Ordinary people became unsung heroes, saving those they could. It was proof that even at the end of the world, humanity can choose between destroying itself or helping itself. And many chose to help. But was all this a lesson? Have we learned anything from the deadliest year in history? That's the burning question. Have we truly learned anything from the greatest massacre in modern history? The answer will leave you uneasy. The Spanish flu simply disappeared. It wasn't a vaccine that defeated it. It wasn't a miracle cure. The virus mutated to less lethal versions. Many people developed immunity, and some isolated communities managed to resist until the storm passed. But the price was between 50 and 100 million lives. Entire families wiped out, ghost towns and entire generations scarred by trauma. Want to know the scariest part? A few years later, the world simply forgot. The Spanish flu became a footnote in history. Everyone talked about the war, the heroes, the battles, but no one wanted to remember the pandemic. Why? Because it was too traumatic. Because there were no clear heroes or villains. Because it was a tragedy without romance, without glory, without meaning. But look at the irony. When you see a surgical mask today, you're seeing an echo of 1918. When you see thermometers in airports, social distancing protocols, field hospitals, all of this was born in that cursed year. Every time a new pandemic emerges, H1N1, COVID-19, the same patterns repeat themselves. The same discussions about masks, the same resistance, the same fears. It's as if humanity were doomed to repeat the same mistakes. Do you want to know the stark truth? We're not much better prepared today than we were in 1918. We have better medicines, better hospitals, better science, but we also have more people, more travel, more global connections. A virus today spreads in hours, not months. And people remain the same, still resisting, denying, protesting against measures that could save their lives. The Spanish flu taught us that the worst war isn't fought with armies. It's fought with microscopic viruses, that humanity is both fragile and resilient, that we can be heroes or cowards depending on the choices we make. But above all, it taught us that forgetting is dangerous, because when we don't remember history, we are doomed to repeat it. And will you remember this history? Or will you do like most and forget until the next pandemic arrives knocking on your door? This question I just asked, whether you will remember or forget, is not rhetorical, it is literal, because at this very moment, you have a choice to make. You can close this video and continue your life as if nothing had happened. Don't let this story get lost among the thousands of other content you consume every day, or you can be part of the solution. Because I'm going to tell you a secret. The only reason pandemics like the one in 1918 happen again is because people forget, politicians forget, governments forget, society forgets. And when we forget, we don't prepare. Sharing this video isn't just clicking a button. It's preserving the memory of 50 million people who died, so you can learn from the mistakes of the past. It's honoring those volunteers who sewed gas masks. It's remembering those doctors who didn't run away. If you subscribe to this channel, you're subscribing to something bigger than entertainment. You're joining a community that believes that knowing history is the only way to avoid repeating it. And if you found this story shocking, wait until you see what's coming. In the next video, I'll show you how a single wrong decision by a doctor in 1928 saved more lives than all the war heroes combined. A discovery born from a mistake, but one that changed the world forever. So what will it be? Will you be another one who forgets? Or will you be someone who remembers, who shares, who learns? Because history doesn't repeat itself by chance. It repeats itself because we let it repeat itself.